Captain's Log Supplemental.
Hey Jeremy, you know those race cars you're busy building?
Yeah, I do.
You,
I
you,
got one
you
that I'm looking at every day.
you know what I don't see you working on?
You don't see me working on the amazing Sentinel system yet.
That's true. It would take all of 10 minutes for you to have one.
And it's very quick and easy to install.
It is. It is. And we could watch you when we are not at the race with you and see how you're doing. And then we can call you up when you get out of the car and tell you everything you did wrong.
And I love that because so many years I've been driving and not been able to see what I'm doing.
I know.
And now we can.
I know. You know what I'd like to do with the video? My most favorite thing is I take the video and I load it on YouTube and then I send it to my coach and say, look at 26 minutes and 17 seconds. Look at this one lap and tell me what I can do better. And every single time, you know what they say?
Everything.
Exactly. Precisely. So with the Sentinel system, you get instantaneous feedback plus useful feedback that unfortunately is accurate for my driving.
I think it's accurate for all of our driving.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's probably true. Yep. But you need to get one in your car, sir.
Yes, I do. And with the discount code that you're going to tell everybody, they can save 10% on this awesome system.
Yep. Trouble free. I haven't had an issue getting video every time we've gone out with the Sentinel. It's always worked. Can't say the same for some of the other systems we've tried. So I don't know. It's on the podcast notes down there. Don't do it while you're driving, though. We like to have our listeners live. It's good.
From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher, and their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicky Fisher, and our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Skripchuk. Their mission: to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to the Garage Heroes in Training Podcast. I'm going to be one of the hosts for this episode. My name is Bill. Who else is hosting?
I'm Vicky.
Miss Vicky, we got returning guests.
I do. It's been a while.
It has been way too long because I screwed up a few times, but that's okay. I'm used to screwing up. That's how I do it. He is, we've got lots of names for him. He's involved with data. He's involved with coaching. And thankfully, it seems more and more he is involved with driving, which we love to see. His call tag on Facebook says the driver is the greatest performance variable in the racing equation. I'm not sure I'm the greatest performance. Oh, variable. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. We call him our Mr. VIR, which we still haven't gotten to. I apologize. Peter Krause, welcome to the podcast again, sir.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Vicky. It's such a pleasure to be on here. I really enjoy and support everything you guys do because I think it's so important to the sport, and it's quite honestly an underserved part of the sport is helping people get through their journey safer, quicker, more easily, and with better outcomes.
Well, we share the same sentiment, sir. So just in case somebody may have missed our prior podcast with you, or they may not be familiar with you yet, brief introduction, because I only scratched the bare surface of what you've been doing in the sport of auto world.
Well, you guys are very kind. I mean, I was very fortunate to get involved with the sport of high performance driving education and club level racing a long time ago. I've been doing this I was a professional mechanic starting about 45 years ago in Durham, North Carolina. I live in Durham, North Carolina, across from Duke University. And for 10 years, I worked in small independent foreign car repair shops and then opened my own. And I was a professional mechanic for another 17 years after that.
Wow.
And We were the largest independent Ferrari and Alfa Romeo repair facility between Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, Georgia, for 20 years.
Mm.
And I've had my shop full of uh, Ferrari 250 GTOs, Lusos, short wheelbases, Daytonas, Boxers, cars that are priceless now, but people were actually driving them back then. And because they drove them, they broke and they brought them to me. So I had an option, I had an opportunity to work with some of the cars that people only dream about. And that has enhanced and bolstered my experience with cars and the dynamics of how they work on the racetrack. The other thing that was interesting to me was I had a number of really good patrons, customers of mine who lent me their racing cars and their high performance street cars to begin my journey to the high performance driving education highway. And I was driving other people's cars for years and years before I had my own on the racetrack. And I had very sage advice from the local Ferrari dealer, Steve Barney, who said, you'd better be careful and treat the cars that are not yours when you drive them like a gun, because if they go off, you'll wish you were dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that has
Oh.
served me well in everything I've driven, because I never drove the car past the point where I felt I was behind it. I never got the feeling that the car was ahead of me. And I see so many single car incidents and multi-car incidents in racing, but mostly single car incidents in driver's ed, where people decide to send it all of a sudden out of the blue, just say, you know what, I'm going to go in there 10 miles an hour quicker than I've ever gone before. And that wasn't an option for me, because if I had done that, I would have been not only out of a ride, but out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very fortunate to work on that and begin to develop a team. By the time I sold my shop in 2007, we had 2 tractor trailers going all over the country, 18 weekends a year, with 12 vintage and sports racing cars all over the country. And my business partner wanted to get bigger, and I wanted to stay the same. We had 12,000 square feet, 7 guys, 2 tractor trailers, and it was plenty of balls in the air. And he wanted to get bigger, I didn't. So I left, and he bought me out. And I said, what do I want to do most? And that is to work one-on-one with drivers, using emerging technology at the end of the 2000s, which was at that time TrackMate and RaceKeeper and a number of other video and data systems that were based on GPS and video to objectively measure what drivers do in the car. I think our minds are very powerful things. I think we remember things the way we would like them to be instead of the way they were. That's not a tattletale. It's just a tool. This equipment is just a tool. It doesn't tell you you're great. It doesn't tell you you suck. It just tells you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And with our ability, with our collective ability, with my ability to sit down with the driver in front of a big screen and say, let's look at what you did and pick 1 or 2 things you can do better. That was really, really an effective formula to catapult me to, well, honestly, a financial success that far outstripped owning a shop that was doing $3 million a year. And pretty soon I fell in with the Porsche crowd. And honestly, I mean, I raced against Porsches for decades. I didn't particularly care to race against other Porsche drivers. And I certainly didn't like working on their cars. But I grew to have a grudging respect, not only for the cars, and then it turned into a real respect, because the cars really are spectacular on the track.
Mm-hmm.
And they're great tools. They're the best tools for learning how to do this craft. But I became the flavor of the month at Porsche Club, all over the East Coast, and started on the West Coast and in the Northeast, and was traveling 200 days a year for 10 years, going to work with clients at HPTE events and vintage, historic, and club racing events. And so I accumulated a tremendous amount of data. And what came out of all of that data was the best drivers, the drivers that can best execute fundamental skills, are surprisingly similar in the way they do this. So if I can sit there and mentor the people that I'm working with to guide them on this travel to their goal, to what they know and where they know they want to be, especially through incremental learning, so that they're not just throwing it against the wall and hoping it sticks, but instead integrating incremental, gradual, and very targeted objectives each session. It's become a very, very successful formula to help people move forward. So that's my story. I love doing this. I get a chance to work with very, very smart people, including both of you, frequently. And honestly, seriously, I mean, we're all committed to the same idea, which is, how do you do this better?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's a journey. It's the best way you could like it's like a video game. It's like I like to think about it. It's you just keep
Levels.
learning as you go, and it's
Yeah.
all levels and what you build on. Absolutely.
Well, I think some people, we had a wonderful discussion before this podcast started.
Yeah, we almost have
And,
another
and
podcast before this. Yeah.
well, the fun thing about it is that you both alluded to the idea that people sometimes feel as though they can skip levels.
Mm-hmm.
Or
And
there's
the
a
problem
secret.
is, yeah, and that's exactly right. And the problem is, because they're very competent in other areas of their lives, because they're all type A personalities who have done exceptionally well at whatever they've done in order to give them the means and the time to do this. They feel as though those skills are transferable right away to getting in a car and conducting it at a high rate of speed around the racetrack accurately and consistently. And that doesn't happen.
Mm-mm.
It
A lot
does
of
not happen. I mean, I have been fortunate, and I will name drop only a little bit. One of the first clients I had, who I had no idea who they were when I met them, and the first several weekends I worked with, was Jim Farley, who is the CEO of Ford.
yeah.
And that was about 15 years ago. And Jim and I have a long and wonderful relationship. And I don't work with him all the time, but I work with him on and off over the last 15 years. And he was one of the first people to embrace simulation training, to learn how to drive European tracks so that he could go to the Spa 6-hour historics and race his GT40 and the classic Le Mans and race his classic Cobra, racing Cobra. And so we would sit there, and he would be on his sim in Michigan, and I would be on my sim here in Durham, and we would do lead follow. And the thing is that all of the people that I work with and all of the people that listen to this podcast are curious people. They want to know more.
Mhm.
And that's what charges me. That's what gets me off.
Mhm. And that's why we added the in training to our first idea of the team name. And we didn't know how appropriate it was until we started doing it. And we're like, wow, we're just never going to get rid of that, I guess. So that's okay.
Mm-mm. Forever in training.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny you say that, because you guys were prescient. You saw what was going on before it was going on. And to me, that is a very special thing. That's a very special skill. And it indicates emotional intelligence rather than just this dogmatic following. Garage
Mm-hmm.
Heroes is one thing. Everybody would love to be a garage hero.
Yeah.
Some people are, but we're always in training, just like you just said, Vicky.
Mm-hmm.
Golly, I mean, I have been going to Lime Rock Park for 36 years. And I went for the first time in 6 years to go race this past weekend at their largest spectator race of the year, which is the Lime Rock Historic Festival.
Mhm.
And I took a car that I had never turned a wheel in, that I had worked on nonstop for the last 3 months, that I bought out of the back of Facebook Marketplace. And I went through that car with a fine-tooth comb and never had a chance to turn a wheel before sticking it in a trailer and going to Lime Rock. But when I went to Lime Rock, I did the same thing that I asked everybody else to do. I walked the track. I reacclimated myself to the track. I did everything to the car. I followed a checklist. I went out and I didn't try to go fast. I just went easy, but I hit my marks. And I ended up having the most successful weekend I've ever had in 36 years at, at Lime Rock Park, where I won all 4 races, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, in the largest race group of the weekend. Out of 230 cars, we had 35 cars in the group, and got awarded an Autodromo uh, chronograph watch, which was the individual group award for people who embody best the spirit of the event for their group. And that was completely unexpected. I was just bowled over because I love that place. I love all my friends there. It's one of the few events that I travel to every year, or frequently. I hadn't been there for a long time, but I just went up and I stayed calm and precise. I have a label on the center of the dash of the steering wheel that says calm and precise. And it was given to me by a friend of mine, Robert Willis, who has passed away from cancer many years ago. He's a restaurateur in Brooklyn, New York, and in Lakeville, Connecticut. And he gave me this plaque, and it said calm and precise. And I think everybody should have that plaque in their car on track.
Mhm.
Because if they did, they would remember what's important, which is to be calm, to excise the emotions in the car. And this is something that we talked about again before this podcast, how emotions can cloud people and interfere with people being in training, and be precise, which is what it takes to be good and to be consistent. So anyway,
Mhm.
I'm running on diarrhea
Fine.
of the mouth. I apologize. I'm just having such a good time. You guys give me such a great burst of enthusiasm. I mean, it's just a lot of fun.
Just
So,
talking about racing is exciting anyway. It
so,
really
It
is.
is because the racing I do is not fraught. Professional racing is honestly a lot of work, and it is not pleasant. It really isn't, because people who are big fish in small ponds who ascend to professional racing, they ascend to professional racing because they think they're good enough to do it, and they want to know if they're good enough to do it. And usually they get there and they discover that they are not as good as they thought they were.
Mhm.
And then all of a
uh,
sudden, the
yeah.
finger pointing begins. And it's the car's fault. And it's the crew's fault. And it's BOP's fault. And it's the sanctioning body's fault. And the thing is that it becomes a downer. And you know what? I don't ever want racing for me to become a downer. And
Mhm.
that's why I choose to race where I do, which is historic racing. I love historic racing. I just got my NASA license back. I've got a couple of NASA track records down at Mid Atlantic. Chris Cabetto runs a great program,
Mhm.
at Summit Point and Virginia International Raceway. And I run in SCCA, I run in VRG, I run in VDCA, I run in VSCCA, I run in many different organizations, but there are a few that I really enjoy.
Yeah. So, I I don't think you're aware of this, but my family is from North Carolina, and it would be
Wow.
in spite of where you currently reside, I will be excommunicated from my family to at least make a comment that no, in spite of where you live, you at least have your car painted the proper color of blue.
Well, it's funny that the car is, it was weird. I was visiting my mother in Philadelphia in April because she's a wonderful mom. She's done a lot of great things, and I was bored, so I was looking on my phone, and I found on Facebook Marketplace this beautiful blue and yellow. I mean, it looked like a Ukrainian flag, is what it looked like. Fiat X19. And people laugh at Fiats because they say, fix it again, Tony. Well, I worked in a Fiat dealership when the cars were sold brand new in this country at the very end. And I know that the cars properly prepared are absolutely positively bulletproof. And
Mhm.
I also know that they have a handling advantage over a majority of the British cars that they typically race against. And so I found out who built this car, a fellow named Judge Parker in Richmond, Virginia, as his sort of last hurrah in historic racing in 2010. And when he found out it wasn't eligible for the group that he wanted to race it with, he got disillusioned and sold it to somebody in Texas, who sold it to somebody in Charleston, South Carolina. And the car sat outside. The people blew it up, fixed it, put it outside on an open trailer with a canvas cover over it, and let it sit for 6 years.
Oof.
And it showed up on Facebook Marketplace, and I said, "Man, that looks like a cool car." And you know what? I got some money burning a hole in my pocket. I think I need another race car. And so I bought it. I went down to Charleston to pick it up in at the end of May, and I spent 3 months solid working on it. I ordered parts from Croatia, Switzerland, Italy, England, here. I had my good friend Steve Holscher, who is a multi-time Solo 2 national champion with SCCA, build the gearbox because he is the whiz bang guy. He's won a couple of national championships in X19 and also in an MR2,
Hmm.
and has said that the suspension geometry between the Series 1 MR2 and the X19 are almost identical.
Oh.
And anyway, he gave me great sage advice. I thrashed on the car. Transmission was on the ground a week before we had to leave for Lime Rock, but Lime Rock. I
Oh.
had Lime Rock on the schedule indelibly. I had to make that event. And honestly, I'm ADHD, so I need that date,
Hmm.
to get whatever I need to get done and to maintain focus. And I was able to do that. And I went up for test day. And the third lap in the test day, I said, I've got something special here because it went 2 seconds quicker than I told the people that I
Wow.
thought it was going to go. And so I thought I was going to be in the top five. I think, one of the things that all of your listeners can benefit from is making sure that they um, control their expectations. I think that it is vitally important when you go out in a HPDE group or a club racing run group that you be very not necessarily that you be brutally honest about your capabilities and your expectations, but that you intentionally aim low. Because then what happens is if you go out and you feel good and you don't feel the pressure of those expectations, you will perform better. And all of a sudden, you're going to come back in, you're going to say, you know what, that session felt pretty good. And then you're going to see, if you're measuring quantitatively the lap time or measuring qualitatively how well you drove with an instructor in the passenger seat, it's going to pay off because that instructor is going to say, man, that was a pretty good session. I didn't have much to tell you, which I think is a sin. But if the instructor says, hey, that was a pretty good session, you're punching above your weight and punching above the expectations. And that's the same way I feel. You can only go up. You want to only go up. You don't want to go down. And to give you the motivation to move forward and to continue this endless training and study that we have of this wonderful sport, which keeps us coming back all the time, we need to manage expectations and say, you know what, I'd like to be in the top five.
Mm.
Or I'd like to be in the top 10. I'd like to be in the
Mhm.
top 10 out of my 32 car group. That would be pretty good. And if
Yep.
you go out and you're fifth, hey, I'm so much the better. And then you go out and you're second, like I was after the first two practice sessions on Friday, and I'm going like, damn, I just wanted to keep Tom Brown and Norm Berkey in sight, and now I'm ahead of them. So all of a sudden, then you have to tamp those expectations down again. You have to say, you know what? This is a new session. I can't ride on the laurels of the last session. I've got to do the same thing that got me here again. And that is the recipe to success for both improving in high performance drivers education and in club racing. It's the same thing. I mean, I hate the fact that people say, well, there's no real similarity between DE and club racing. No, there is a similarity. You're trying to conduct the car on a consistent, efficient, quick path around the racetrack as well as you can. You're trying to execute all of the control inputs, the steering, the throttle, the brakes, the timing, the amplitude of every control input, and the relationship of those control inputs to each other as well as you possibly can. And if you do that, you get results. That is what is the daddy about this sport.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
at
I'm
the
just talking.
nope, at the risk of never getting to the questions we started to talk about, I have one. We had an episode that you probably shouldn't ever listen to, but it seems to have started a firestorm of
What's the
discussion.
number?
Oh,
And I
don't
will look it up.
no, no, we try not to make people pay.
Okay.
Um, so
Text me.
the focus of the episode was how to get the fastest. Like, what's the most efficient path? And what would you do? And our things went from get a coach, go to a skid pad, a blend of endurance racing and HPDEs. Um, Perhaps it all depends on where you are in your journey, right? Like in the beginning versus the middle versus the end, the prescription gets very different. Maybe if you're kind of middle-ish, maybe it's to do spec type racing because then you can judge yourself and get good comparative data. So, since we answered the question poorly, what's a good answer, Peter?
Well, you actually, you hit the nail right on the head in that description. You said there is no one answer for each driver because they're all in a different part of the journey.
Mhm.
I can say that from my anecdotal knowledge, from working with tens of thousands of drivers over the last 40 years trying to undergo this journey, I would say that the most important thing that people can learn early is car control, is
Mhm.
basic car control skills. Something as simple as skid pad training. And unlike 10 years ago, skid pad training is actually more readily available to drivers now than it used to be 10 years ago. There are some mark clubs that are integrating it in their programs, especially for green group or novice students. There are other individual professional coaches, people like Johann Schwartz and Lee Carpentier in the Northeast, who are running skid pad clinics multiple times a year at Carolina Motorsports Park and at Lime Rock Park. And I got to tell you, those programs are worth their weight in gold because they give the driver so much more confidence in the ability to read the car and move forward with the car in a safe, incremental way rather than sending it and hoping it sticks, that they have the foundation they need to build other skills. And that is really the first order of business. The second thing is, I do think that in the beginning, when I started doing this, there was only two places to get on track, maybe three. And that is SCCA, which is really a minor player nowadays, honestly. And I hate to say that, being a member of SCCA for such a long time and having a lot of respect for their highest level competition, the runoffs. Um, uh, that was the only way that I could get into wheel to wheel. But the second thing was Track Time, which was a company that was put together by a group of guys in Ohio and then bought by Bobby Rahal in 1987, was the first professional school that I worked with for DE. And that was a really good school. And then Car Guys, which I was a senior instructor with Dan Unkefer and Dan Dazzo and a couple of other guys out of the Northern Virginia area between 1989 and 1997. And we put tens of thousands. I put 10,000 people through our classroom sessions with Dan and I, and that was really really good. But um, Skip Barber and the professional schools at that time were really really good because they gave again the foundation for car control skills that people really are sort of bypassing when they go to a DE or club racing event.
Mhm.
Uh, Failing that, I think that the most important thing to do, I don't think people can benefit from a coach until they know enough and have a firm enough foundation to build on that foundation.
Hmm.
I would love to say, oh, everybody needs a coach. But honestly, I think a coach is a waste for a green group student. Well, it might be a good idea for somebody to get authoritative data and objectively supported information from a professional early on. I think the Mark Club programs do a pretty good job of the basics. Um, and and the problem is that again they sort of bypass car control. Um, Now, when you get to be at the intermediate level, I think the Mark clubs fall away in their ability to provide mentoring to newly minted solo drivers. So, so we've talked about the novice drivers. Yes, you really need to do a car control program. That would be the best way to build it,
Hmm.
the foundation that you need. The middle, the intermediate group, the people that have begun that are newly minted solo drivers, those people need to start reviewing their own information first and foremost.
Hmm.
I was a big proponent of video and data in the car in DE events 15, 18 years ago, 20 years ago now. And um, I know that there are a variety of attitudes that regions and chapters of DE programs have towards in-car data logging and video, but everybody can put a damned GoPro in their car.
Hmm.
And the simplest, easiest way for an intermediate driver to improve is to review their own information immediately after they get in and off the track, because 85% of what they watch will be exactly as they remember it. But 15%, 10 or 15% definitely, maybe as much as 20, will not be as they remember it. And if they are able to identify those areas on the video review of their own performance on the previous session right away and identify those areas that they are not doing what they thought they did and focus their entire targeted attention to improving those, they can make the biggest, quickest jump that way. Um, and then advanced drivers, red group, black group, instructors, which honestly is a majority of the people that I work with. Um, those people, we need to sit down and we need to take them apart. We actually sit down and we go back to the beginning and say, how long does it take you to go from wide open throttle to brake application to maximum brake pressure or maximum deceleration if we don't have the brake pressure information? Because there is a target for that number. And if you aren't there, that's what you need to work on. And then the next thing, then what happens is they all of a sudden begin to brake so well that they stop 200 yards before the corner entry.
Been
And
there,
they go,
done
oh
that.
my God, holy
Mhm.
Moses, what have I been doing? It's because they're not utilizing the full capability of the car. They're driving to what they think the car is capable of, rather than what the car is capable of, which is how you get better, is
Mhm.
driving the car closer to the car's capability over a greater percentage of the lap. That is what I work with the highest level drivers. Um, the other thing that's really cool is in advanced level drivers, and advanced level drivers are near and dear to my heart because those are the people that I work with the most. But the thing about advanced level drivers is advanced level drivers, and I don't care if I am working with a former world driving champion, which I had an opportunity to do 14 years ago at Mont Tremblant in Canada,
It's
or
a
a
tough place to survive, but
multi-time Sebring 12-hour winner, or a Daytona Rolex 24-hour winner, class winner, and an overall winner at Sebring. The issue is that no driver is so consistent that they don't do something really, really well in a lap other than their quickest lap.
hmm.
Now, what that means is this whole idea of theoretical best lap or ideal lap or um, these machines that I've been promoting and such a proponent of put together in the software is all your best sections or segments, corners or corner complexes. If they were stitched together, what would you do? And it's always quicker than your quickest lap. And if you can determine where that is, so the the Apex Pro does this in the app. They do a theoretical best lap, which is all your best segments together. The Garmin does an ideal lap, and it also does, it will actually stitch together a video of your ideal lap, of the best lap you could do. And man, if you look at that before you go out and do that, you will get better. So
Wow.
that's a tool that I've used for years and years because TrackMate, which came out in 2004, Glenn Stevens down in Atlanta, he stopped selling hardware in 2015, but it's still a good system. And they put together a video. They put together a software that put together video that would stitch together all your best individual corners. And if you looked at that, there was no question what was the right gear, what was the right line, what was the right car position, what was the right throttle pickup. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't have any more questions. I just need to do that.
Wow.
And that is how the best drivers get quicker. Is they study what they did, they adopt everything they did well and try to put it together as one lap, and all of a sudden they're going quicker with less risk. And that is key.
Miss Vicky,
What?
you know you have a Garmin that does all this for you.
Yes, I know. I know
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peter,
So
know,
let's talk about the Garmin for one second.
does the Garmin have a function where you could send that best lap to TikTok so Miss Vicky could see it?
Yes. Yes.
well, you know what? The nice thing is as he's sitting here talking, is that we've ticked a lot of stuff off our list just by what he's been explaining. So that's some good stuff. We've done Garmin work, skid pad, Johann Schwartz. you know, I've worked with him, and
He's gifted. He's really
right,
gifted. He's
right.
very
And then I know the one with gathering the data as soon as you get off the track was the fastest way that we were improving when we had a coach at the time. As soon as we got off, she would grab it, we'd go in, she put it right there on the computer, and she would just say, okay, this is what's going on. This is what you could do. And this next time you go out, and next time we went out, we made those changes in the moment. And just everything that you were saying, it's good to know for our team in general and our training that we are on the right path and we're doing the right things.
You are. And part of it is because again, you have a touch point with a variety of different people who really know their business.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's really cool is you guys are able to discriminate what is valid and what is not. And I think the internet is a great thing. We've all been, barraged with a great deal of information. There's no shortage of opinions. Everyone's got one.
Nope.
But the data in the video to me is gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Again, bringing back to what we said very early on is it doesn't tell you you're great. It doesn't tell you you suck. It just tells you what happened.
But it's
Mhm.
most effective in the moment.
It
Like
is.
you
You
said, and that
can't wait.
resonated with me right there, because if I had walked off the track with the data that was given to me and say, okay, now go home and go take a look at and study, I would never remember where I was on the track or how I was going to improve the next time I get out there.
That's cool.
So it's an important thing out there, guys. That
That is
was
really cool. And
I
I
had an
think,
aha moment right there.
yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, one of the things that's fun in endurance racing is I think that endurance racing is a great way for people to up their game. And the reason why is because everybody in the car has different strengths in different areas of the course and different
Mhm,
skill executions.
mhm.
It's all about building belief systems. So if a driver has a particularly strong belief system about braking the car or slowing the car, or another driver has a strong belief system about what that car is capable, how fast that car is capable of going through X corner.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of the other drivers, with a review of the information from that driver, can begin to build their own belief system.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, it's a rising sea floats all boats. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed working with endurance racing teams, even chump car teams, Lemons teams, I mean AER teams, WRL teams, I'll never forget it. I put a Garmin. Actually, the team owner put a Garmin in um, a car that was driven by a guy that won his class at Petit Le Mans in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
This was a WRL event at VIR. And we asked the driver, who's a good friend of mine and very, very good. He's much shorter than his lady, who is much taller than him. That's the only thing I'll say. And they got married and they're a wonderful couple. But we asked him to listen via Bluetooth to the advanced race coach in the Garmin.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even take advantage of the post-session opportunities, which I think are the most valuable tool in the box. But we said just listen to it and just let it give you the feedback of what's working and what is not. And then
Mm-hmm.
integrate that in the qualifying session. And so he actually went out, and at the end of all the practice sessions, he was 4/10 up on a 55 car field in a 981 GT4 in a Carrera, uh, a Cayman GT4 Club Sport, first gen. And so we stuck the team owner stuck the Garmin in the car. He went out for qualifying, and he was already 4/10 up on the field, and he found another 4/10. And I was like, damn, that's pretty strong. So I asked him, I said, so what did you do? He said, I just listened to the lady. I was laughing my butt off. I was like, you know, why why were you open to that? He said, well, because it made sense, because it felt better, because it validated what I felt. And I checked it off my list. And I said, you know what? I said, this is fast learning. This is
Hmm.
fast learning. This is really good, because here we got a guy 4/10 ahead of everybody else, and he finds an equal amount of time just having some external, objectively logged information tell him that he's doing the right thing, validating his performance. So
Giving
I
him a
think
boost of confidence.
it's confidence. It's all a confidence game, the whole freaking thing. DE, club racing, it doesn't matter. To go faster, you must feel like you can go quicker than you think you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's pretty obvious for us. We keep looking at the front of the field that's lapping us, but we'll get there. It's fine.
You'll get there. I mean, the problem is that all cars are not equal. So you
Mm-hmm.
that's why managing expectations is super important. You cannot control who shows up at a DE session or a weekend, and you cannot control who is in your race group. You can't.
Nope.
All you can do is focus inward and focus on yourself and say, I'm going to execute the best execution of fundamental
Mm-hmm.
skills. That's
Mm.
all I'm going to do. And if you do that, you will outperform your own expectations.
Well, that's what one thing that we are good at is we tend to judge our individual drivers against their individual past selves. And as long as that slope is going in the right direction, we know we're going in the right direction.
That trend line. That's it. It's great that you pointed that out, because I think people get freaked out about variance between session to session when they're not in control of the track conditions or anything else, I mean, they might be driving on crapped out tires and they sit there and, well, I'm going slower. No, 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 no. In the general scheme of things, look at what the other guy, the pace setter's doing. He's half a second off. You're 3/10 off. Guess what? That's a net gain.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you know,
Indeed. So I'm trying to figure out how much of your life we're going to take up in this one particular incident. Because believe it or not, for those playing the home game, we have yet to start question number one, but we have questions.
But this is great.
It
This is
is. I'm not saying
great.
that. I'm just saying, Peter,
Absolutely
we're gonna
wonderful
have you
information.
on again and
Well,
again
you
and
you know,
again.
you guys are really fun, and I got to tell you, I mean, you're very kind in allowing me as much rope as you are to go on and on.
It's
Um,
you're letting it all out with information that is so important and so valuable. I love when a guest comes on and just takes the reins. Uh, it helps guide us.
well, I mean, the thing is that we're all being guided. That's what's
Right.
really fun. I mean, I think about new things as I'm relating these things to you. I mean,
Hmm.
Bill, you said, hey man, we're gonna have to do some more stuff, and I'm sitting there scratching my head, going, "Damn, I've thought of two or three things that could take up the whole
I know.
library." And
I know this
uh,
doc is getting quite long. I keep adding
oh,
things. I'm like, oh, we got to talk about that.
well, it's so much fun, I mean, that's the bottom line, and my great colleague and friend Ross Bentley is king of that. He ends every missive with "Have fun out there,"
Mhm.
and I
Hmm.
think life is too short. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and the thing is that I just felt this past weekend after you know many years of sort of flailing in the wilderness. I had been driving a very, very fast sports prototype. Been winning races, setting track records with a 40-year-old sports racing car. I loved the car. It had scalpel-like precision, unlike the car that I'm driving right now, which is like a big meat cleaver. But the sports prototype, you know, I had felt as though I had done everything I wanted to do with it. That there wasn't much more I could do, and I was losing my motivation to drive, and yet I was encouraging other people to get out of their comfort zone. And I was sitting there going, man, I need to fix this. I'm out of balance. And so that's why I bought this car out of the back of Facebook Marketplace and said, I've always wanted one of those. I think they're really cool. I want to run with small bore cars that are way slower than what I've been racing, way
Mhm.
slow. 20 seconds a lap slower at VIR. But I got 40 of my closest friends 2 inches from me, all four corners.
Yep.
And I can trust them to go through the corner without hitting me. And they can trust me not to run them off the road. And that counts for a lot.
Does.
And the thing is that I wanted to race with a group of guys and ladies that I felt good on the track and off the track. And after this past weekend, I didn't know. Honestly, I was filled with trepidation when I went to Lime Rock. I was like, man, I haven't driven a production-based car in decades, in almost 2 decades. And I've run, 992 GT3 cups and all kinds of client cars and, to do demo laps and stuff like that. But I hadn't raced a production-based car for a long time. And I was really, quite frankly, anxious about where I'd be. But this management of expectations was key
Mhm.
because I said, you know what? I'm not going to work myself up. I'm not going to peg my expectations on an unrealistic level when I don't even know what the level is that I'm going to function at.
Mhm.
And then when I went out and I was like confident, as Vicky said, all of a sudden I was like, ooh, I'm confident. I'm confident in this car. I'm confident in myself. And that translated 100% to percentage wide open throttle over the lap.
Mhm.
And that's a data measure that it can actually be uh, computed in AIM, VBox, Motec, Bosch, Morelli, all of these sophisticated data acquisition programs. And the best data engineer in the world, a guy named George Seegers, who has written several books for the Society of Automotive Engineers, and I've attended a couple of his seminars. He said that if you want to know if a change to the setup of a car has been a success or failure, look at that measure. Look at the percentage of wide open throttle, which is throttle above 85%, because 100%, 85% really doesn't make a lot of difference in other cars. And sometimes a little confidence lift will allow a driver to get back to wide open throttle sooner. So it all comes out in the wash.
Mhm.
But if you have a guy that you change a set of springs in the back, 50 pounds, and he goes out and he does 55.63% wide open throttle over 55.63% of the lap. And he was doing 55.57% the last time. That's an improvement.
Right.
So when you have drivers that are capable of doing several laps within tenths, hundredths, or thousandths of a second, that's how you determine if a driver is trending in the right direction, which is, Bill, what you said earlier, which is this trend line is all important. The trend line is what we're looking for.
Indeed. Everybody's looking for that last little tenth or so.
Yep. Yep.
All
Well,
right.
part of the reason I like that sports racing car that I had was that it took the engine out of the equation.
Mhm.
I had raced production-based cars before. I didn't have the budget some of the bigger guys had. I felt like I was motored all the time. I got sick and tired of that. I said, I want a class where it's not about going faster because everybody's got their foot down. It's about who slows less.
Mhm.
And that class taught me more than any other single thing. I mean, I could be on the first three rows of the grid anywhere in the country. And we'd have typically 15, 18, 20 cars on the grid, identical power and identical prep. And what would happen is I would be on the first three rows and I look around and there'd be 100 years of racing experience around me. And we would be flipping each other off on the pace lap and waving and laughing in our helmet. And we'd never put each other off or we'd smash each other, but we were covered by a blanket all the
Right.
time. And it was like, okay, how do I force my foot to come off the brake pedal and roll a little more speed into the corner? And to me, it was a great driver development tool. And that's why I recommend, I've seen a trend in DE of people buying factory built race cars to do just DE, not club racing or pro racing, but M4 GT4s, the first series cars, M2 Club Sport racers, M2 CSR BMWs.
The rush
I've
cars.
seen some Aston Martin GT4s start showing up in HPDE. I've seen a ton of Club Sports, both 981 and 718 versions. And those cars are really, really well built by the factory. They are what they are. They're the best they can be. There's no variation between them. A top level driver can get into one car and then get into the other and do within a thousandths or
Yep.
several hundredths of a second. And they're safe. I see a lot of people, and this is something we haven't talked about yet, but since the pandemic, I have seen much worse driving standards.
Mhm.
And I have seen many more incidents in driver's education events and in club racing events and in pro racing events. And I rue that. I decry that. I shout out about it on Facebook. I get yelled at by people saying, well, that's just racing. And I say, well, that's bullshit. That is wrong. It is wrong for somebody to crash a car. It is wrong for somebody to go off and keep their foot in it and hit whatever they were going to hit harder instead of getting out of the throttle and getting the car under control.
Mhm.
And the problem is that we see this in every aspect of competition. Doesn't matter whether it's lemons, jump car, PCA. PCA in particular, sits there and beats their chest and say, we're the safest club racing program in the country. And that's just not true. It's just not. It's not true. It's a pipe dream. It's telling a lie. It's a good program, but it's not the safest one. And the point is that most of these incidents, and I've been involved with thousands of forensic investigations in single car and multiple car incidents in both driver's education and amateur club racing events. And the problem is that most of these accidents were avoidable. Bottom line.
It
Hmm.
is.
So I'll quit.
Nope. You're not quitting yet. You don't get off that
On that
easy.
somber note.
Well, here's what we do. We lured you in. We hooked you with this great topic that we were going to talk about. And our audience had questions. And honestly, their questions are better than our questions. So we're going to have you on again. But first question they had was, and these are going to be all over the place. So there's no theme, bias ply versus radials for racing.
So I think that, this is a very contentious issue.
I know.
I think that there are a lot of people, especially early on in the learning curve, people who say running A7 or R7 Hoosiers is a sure recipe for disaster because of sudden breakaway. And honestly, I don't believe that. I really don't. I think that there is no magic pill. There is no silver bullet. There is nothing, there is no sword of Damocles that is going to fall on somebody's head who is running A7s or R7s, causing them to lose quick control in a corner. I disagree with that. I think that if people are calm and measured in their approach, I do like bias ply tires. And part of the reason I like bias ply tires is because I love vintage and historic cars, which are notoriously more difficult to drive. But if you want to drive, I think people delay the progression from slow tires, like street tires, like 200 tread wear or 100 tread wear. They delay the progression going to something like a real competent radial, like an A7 or an R7 Hoosier, too long because it saps the ability of the driver to have the confidence they need to get out of their comfort zone. That's the issue with radial tires. I think that the scare tactics that a majority of drivers education organizations use to discourage people from running uh, less than 100 wear tread wear radials in DE is wrong. I think that uh, I don't think that even green students should be limited to 200 tread wear tires or more. I just don't.
Well, Miss Vicky just got her first few sets of racing slicks, and she will be trying them out for the first time soon.
I will
Purple
on a
crack.
good day.
We didn't just buy one set because I knew they weren't going to stay.
Well, it's fun because if you do it, the sooner you do it, the more fun you have. That's what I think.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what the sensation's going to be.
You're gonna love it. And the thing is that you just don't want to do anything too suddenly. That's all. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that anything is gonna get in your way,
Hmm.
nor do I think anything is gonna harm you. I do think you uh every car wants to be told what to do. A car never likes not to be told what to do.
And it
And
doesn't like being yelled at.
and it doesn't like being yelled at. And so that's why if you follow those simple things, which is what you've obviously, identified as the most important thing, it's not going to make a difference what tires you got. It really
Hmm.
is. It's just going to do everything better. It's going to brake better. It's going to turn in better, which is going to give you more confidence. I love sticky tires. I love our comps. I think our comps for DE should be a necessity. I think people should roll to the paddock with a trailer with the right tires on it. That's what I think.
Hmm. Great.
All right. So since we opened the door, we have a series of questions that we usually ask at the end. I brought a couple forward for you, sort of complimentary. So, what would your ideal racing series be in detail? I'm talking cars, we're talking tires, we're talking aero, we're talking everything.
Well,
You have the
it's
magic
interesting.
wand.
Well, it's interesting. I have watched with great interest BMW Car Club of America and a number of other club racing organizations adopt a power to weight ratio,
Hmm.
which makes people feel a lot better about equity and about equality. I think that is something that always encourages racing. If people feel like they've got a chance, then they participate. I've been shocked at the Porsche Motorsports North America's Sprint Challenge Championship, which is an entry-level pro championship all over the East Coast for specific Porsche models, 718 Club Sport and the 991.2 and 992 GT3s. The reason why I'm so high on that series is because it's factory supported. It is expensive to enter and run, but nobody has a disadvantage. And that's what I really, so my optimal race series would be a series that I felt like everybody had a shot. I think that's really important.
Hmm.
But I also think that to me, you've got to have a series that attracts different cars also, which is just the opposite of what I just said, which is you have a bunch of Porsches, a bunch of Caymans, a bunch of GT3s, and they're all racing together, but they're racing against each model. I'm racing against vintage cars and historic cars, and we are following the old SCCA rules, which are based on horsepower and weight. And that is really good because all of a sudden there's enough data to compare, and you all of a sudden determine that everybody's got pretty much a balanced performance level that they can expect. So I don't think I really answered your question.
You got
And
us close.
I don't think I answered it very well. But
That's okay.
you've got to have a racing series that makes people want to race with that series. And I think that every racing series goes through a cycle where it becomes insanely popular for a short period of time. And then a whole bunch of people more get on it. And then all of a sudden it sort of loses its charm, or it's not well administered or something like that. So everything is cyclical. And you just have to realize that the more things change, the more they stay the same.
All
So
right.
that's a
So
bad answer, but
it gets us there. Um, we got two more listener questions. So your night is blissfully going to end shortly. So you will survive, sir. Uh, one was wondering if there was any way that you conceive of or describe the EOB and BOB uh, from Ross, because they understand what Ross is trying to say, but they're having trouble applying it to their driving.
that makes perfect sense. I think the most valuable thing, the most valuable concept that Ross has been able to articulate is the concept of EOB. I heard it from Ross before I heard an even clearer explanation from none other than Dion von Moltke.
Yep.
And Dion took EOB one step further, which was if you can go back to power before the car is pointed in the direction that allows you to continuously and progressively complete the application to wide open throttle, you are finished braking too soon. And I would have to say that that is absolutely, positively, 110% the number one problem I see in everyone's driving, is that people who are done their braking too soon say, if I am finished my braking, I must go back to power. And what they do is when they do that reflexively, it causes the weight transfer to go to the rear. It releases or allows the front tires to come up and become less weighted and less tractively efficient. And they're adding steering input at the same time. And so all of a sudden they are screwing themselves royally because of their reflexive automatic response to the end of braking, which is go back to throttle. And so I think it's important to look at both Ross's EOB concept, which is the end of braking is past turn in, because that allows the weight to stay on the front and increase the efficiency of the steering input. With Dion's suggestion, which is to go back to throttle before the apex area, and the apex area can be very large in long corners, is it's really important to take both of those, synthesize them together, and make absolutely sure that you're doing that. Because if you don't do that, you are guilty of what Bruce McGinnis at Skip Barber Racing articulated to me 35 years ago. And that is that you're never going to be able to continuously and progressively go from the application of throttle all the way to wide open, which is the number one thing you need to do to get through and off every corner.
Mm-hmm.
So EOB, again, the concept is, most people who listen to Ross and hear EOB, they say, well, where is EOB? And Ross, I love Ross to death. I mean, we spent a lot of time together.
I have an impersonation. You want to hear it?
Oh boy.
Which is pretty damn good.
It depends.
There you go. And yeah, you know, it's I was just about to say that. I was just about to say that, you know, I love Ross to death, but the problem is I'm not as wishy-washy as him. I think, and I understand why he is not concrete. I understand why he's a little equivocal about that, because there's no one answer that can satisfy every problem. But I do believe that this whole idea of synchronizing the end of braking with the application of throttle is key to the efficiency drivers execute to get through a corner the best way they possibly can.
Mm-hmm. I think the other reason he's that way is in one of his books early on, he said something about being on the brake or on the gas, and that made it forbidden to ever coast, ever. And you know,
so let me actually add some context to that. So one of the things that, you know, one of the only professional schools that was around when Ross started was Bertil Roos. And Bertil was a remarkable driver from Scandinavia. He had a school in Pocono. He ran a school in Bridgehampton, New York. And he was a winning Formula Car and sports racing car driver. And he was the number one proponent of either on the gas or on the brake. He was also a proponent of get all your braking done in a straight line.
that's a bias I inherited.
Yep. I think that was definitely influenced by that, for sure, because the tires are not inherently stable when you turn the wheel. And the car has to build a significant slip angle for a bias ply to work, whereas a radial doesn't require that much slip angle to work. And there was a competing methodology that was put forward by Skip Barber starting in 1975. And that was the idea that you should, in fact, carry the braking past the turn-in point. And I asked Skip a long time ago, because he was a classmate of my mother's at a Germantown Friends School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they didn't know each other, but I used that as an in to get to Skip. And I asked Skip, I said, so how did you figure this out? He said, I was watching during practice for Formula One, the 6-hour endurance race drivers like Pedro Rodriguez and all Mario Andretti and all these guys driving Alfa Tipo 33s and Ferrari 512s and Porsche 917s at Watkins Glen in 1972. And I was watching them go into turn one, and no one had their brake lights off until the apex. And he said, that shattered my world.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I mean, he didn't say it like that. He just said, it was an epiphany for me, because I realized that the slowest point should be around the apex, not at turn-in.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the biggest stumbling block a majority of DE drivers and club racing drivers have
Right.
is they are still, no matter what they think, no matter how much thought they've given it, no matter how much planning they have put in their mind before they go out into that session, they are still off the brakes well before where they should. And they are not using the brakes to turn the car. What does Mario Andretti say? He says it's amazing how many drivers think the brakes are just for slowing the car. And that is not true. It's for orienting the car in the proper direction so that people can commit to that progression to wide open throttle sooner and quicker. And those
It is a
people are
hard
the
thing
quickest.
to remember that.
It is. It is. It's really hard. It's super hard.
Especially if the first time you do it wrong.
Right. That
Yeah.
is true. That is true. But like everything else and how you break through plateaus, the first time you do it right,
Yep.
it's like, oh my God,
Mid-Ohio keyhole.
bingo. That
I
is
know
such a great place. That is
I know
such a great
exactly where it was.
You can remember that. That
Oh
is
yeah.
so cool. That is
Yep.
so cool.
So Tom O'Gorman has a new term for trail braking.
Which is
Braking properly.
well, so one of the things that is interesting is there has been a great deal of confusion about the term trail brake. Some people, matter of fact, a lot of the people that I speak to, including instructors, say trail braking is actually when you turn the wheel and your foot is still on the brake. That's not true because you're not necessarily using the brakes to orient the car other than the direction that you're steering. You're not asking to distribute the weight in such a way that the car develops a slip angle that it wouldn't ordinarily. And so Skip Barber got so fussy, Skip Barber Racing School got so fussy about this that they renamed trail braking to a term brake turning. So you could trail brake, which means at the end of the back straight at VIR, you would bend the car to the left under brakes, but you wouldn't be trying to pivot the car on the right front tire contact patch. You were just trying to slow the car so that you could turn right quickly and go down the roller coaster. And brake turning would be if you stood the car on its nose and then engaged, extended end of braking into a corner such that you were turning and you released the brake and the car was pivoting in a right turn on the left front tire contact patch. And the slip angle of the back of the car would be developing more quickly than the slip angle in the front of the car. And that would be brake turning, or what Tom is proper braking. And I have the most respect for Tom. I mean, I have watched Tom develop over the years. He is an incredibly gifted guy. He is a very well-spoken driver, and he walks the talk. And that's rare. That's why I like Johan so much. That's why I like Tom Long so much. That's why I like Mike Skeen so much. Why I like Jonathan Goring so much, Lee Carpentier. I mean, there are so many good people now. I mean, when I started doing this, there was E. Paul Dickinson out of Pittsburgh. There was Jim Pace out of Florida. There was me. There were a couple of guys on the West Coast, and that was it. And now there's thousands of coaches around, professional coaches around. And I had a wonderful conversation with Kevin Madsen, who I respect very much. And, he just sent me a text this morning. He said, I'm so glad I ran into you at the IMSA event. He said, we had such a great conversation. And I was like, I don't remember, but he gets it. And Tom O'Gorman gets it. And there's so many really good, Eric Meyer gets it.
Yep.
Chuck gets it, I mean, with his new book release. I think that we are in a really golden age of driver's education and club racing improvement. I mean, you guys and you guys are front and center in this. You're right in the middle of it, which is what's great.
I feel pressure.
Well, what does Sebastian Vettel say? He says you're either getting pressure or giving pressure. I love it.
Mm.
I like it for the fact that we're seeing more women drivers now in the racing. And I've been really, really enjoying that.
I think that's so important. I think that every culture benefits from a woman's point of view, in my opinion, on a lot of different levels and a lot of different ways. I don't think that I think driving is an intellectual exercise, which means that it is not gender based. That
Mhm.
the best execution of fundamental skills have nothing to do with gender. Um, for over a decade, more than 20% of my client base happen to be women. And these are women who are driving at the highest level: World Challenge, Porsche Sprint Challenge, uh, vintage and historic racing. I mean, I love this because honestly, women execute better than men do in a stressful environment. And I think that the other thing I really like is I love the increase in women centric and women only driving programs. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because what it does is it allows a safe space. Honestly, I think that the atmosphere at some club racing and even driver's education is toxic with male testosterone overflowing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is an intimidating environment, not for women, for other men.
Yeah, it is true.
And 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 you can tell
And I'll
that.
tell you why, is because women are used to it.
Yeah, and that sucks too. That's really bad too. But that's a whole nother subject. But I I agree with you 100%. I think that uh so Anita Barnes, who is a wonderful woman who you should really, really seek out and interview, and I will send you
Mm-hmm.
contact information. She is a woman who she's a horsewoman. She's older. She has a Porsche 991 Carrera Turbo, and she has embraced this sport with both arms. And she has been on every webinar that Ross has done in the last year. And we worked together a little bit at Virginia International Raceway, and she's got the right attitude, and she is kicking ass. And I think that's really important. I mean, I saw Jamie Chadwick, who is a Williams Formula One development driver and winner of
Yep.
the W Series several years in a row, just destroy people in a Ford Galaxy at Goodwood this past weekend in the live stream. And I just think this is really important because I think this is not a gender-based sport. I think this is a sport for intelligent people. And I think that men, women, intelligent people should be attracted to this sport and should be able to participate in this sport unfettered.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to, I'm not sure who it was, but I want to say it was Susie Wolf uh
Another
earlier.
great pioneer.
I know. All these people, future podcast guests, they just don't know it yet.
I can get you Susie's contact
Oh, that
information.
would be fantastic. But I think one of the things, and again, I'm thinking she said it, but it might not have been. One of the things that's prevented a larger percentage of female drivers in F1 or capable of F1, besides the generally smaller pool of people who compete at the lower levels, is there's an artificial ceiling in F2 because F2 cars don't have power steering. And that's a disadvantage to the, nominally less upper body strength that a female typically has versus a corresponding male person. So, and that can artificially increase the difference or the lower numbers of
See,
people who.
I would discount that. And
Okay.
and part of the reason I discount that is because Susie is not a current competitor,
Hmm.
and so she can't know. And I would rather listen to somebody like Jamie
Yep.
on that, or
I would too.
Bia, you know, or some of the other folks. But the other thing is that Danica Patrick, who gets untold amounts of hate,
Yep.
um, from her current gig, her announcing gig, is the only woman that has won a championship auto racing team or IndyCar race, period. And those cars don't have power steering. And they used to fuss because she weighed less than the guys did. I mean, it's just such bullshit. It really,
It
I'm
is.
sorry, but the point was she put herself in a position to win when she led those 4 laps in 1995 at the Indy 500. I heard a collective sigh of relief from a lot of reasonable people
Hmm.
saying, "You know what? This is cool. This is the way it's supposed to be." And I spent a lot of time with Lynn St. James um, on Women in Motorsports initiative that has been adopted by Connie Nyholm, who is the track principal and owner at Virginia International Raceway. They're having a women's only racing school this fall, and it's already fully subscribed. I mean, it's just a good time to move forward on this. But
Hmm.
I on the F2 and on F1, F1 is not a sport. It is a business, and it's really about who brings the money. And honestly, I mean, uh, Catherine Legg, who is an incredibly competent driver in both sports cars and IndyCar, worked for years to get back in IndyCar. She's just been announced for the rest of the season.
That's awesome.
But the point is that I just see so many artificial barriers thrown up in front of women. I just do.
Yeah.
It's I think it's wrong.
But I do have to say, I'm not sure if this goes for all women out there, but when when girls end up on the track, especially when they know each other, it is a different vibe that goes on than, you know, going out. I don't know, like if I was racing against the guys, I have a feeling that the guys are just competitive in the car and they're focusing on track. I believe that when the girls are on there, it's a camaraderie as they compete. They are competing against everybody else and themselves, but they are pulling each other along more than they are competing just on the track.
I think that's true in club level driving,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think
Yes.
that's true at the
Yes.
highest level of driving. I
No,
think
no, not on the highest level, but
I
definitely in club racing.
yeah, definitely in club racing, the women work in a more collaborative way.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say that it's never after you. But it's I will give you space. You may coexist. I will not run you off. I trust you not to run me off.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, all of racing and all of driver's education could benefit from a little bit more of that.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah, I
right.
like it. It's a vibe.
It is a vibe, and it's a wonderful vibe, and we need more of it. We need more of it. We do.
I love racing with like if I go out there with like a girl posse. I love going out there with a girl posse. It's
Well,
freaking
honestly,
awesome.
what I've really enjoyed is watching girl posses whip up on
Uh-huh.
some men who just can't, who just decompensate,
Uh-huh.
which I really enjoy
Well, they're very soft.
during and after the session.
Okay,
It's fun.
we've got one more question. It totally
Okay.
has no transition whatsoever from what we were just
No,
talking about, but that's fine. We're used to being disjointed and just
no,
rambling on, but that's
no,
fine.
it's okay.
Oh,
It's
I
All
okay.
love
right.
it.
Looking forward to the answer on this one. There's this listener, his name's Bill. Um, what car? You're familiar with the claw game? Like at
No,
a amusement
no,
park? So you put a quarter in and there's this little claw and it moves around and you go and
manipulate the
pick up
claw.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So you're running the claw game at a track. You get to choose the track and you get to switch into a car that you raced against in the past or racing against now. And you get to tell me which car and what track.
Oh, gee. So, it's funny. Everybody always says, "What's your favorite track?" And I say, "Well, it's hard to say."
There's
Um,
so many good
and
ones.
and I'm gonna pick a track that is not one of my favorite tracks, but I'm gonna pick a car that is one of my favorite cars. And that is, if I played the claw game, I would want a Pratt and Miller Chevrolet Intrepid GTP car at the Watkins Glen Grand Prix circuit without the inner loop.
Wow.
Mm.
And yes, I am aware that that course configuration and a mechanical failure in that car cost Tommy Kendall his ankles.
Ooh.
But I think the most stunning example of speed I have ever seen was that car on that track, and I would give some body part to do that. I would. I would. Toby Bean, whose son Theo and his brother took two of those cars, takes two of those Chevrolet Intrepid GTP cars to Watkins Glen for the vintage races every year. And I've had an opportunity to work with Theo and examine his data, and he's very, very quick. I mean, he's damn near as quick as Tom was. Um, and yes, the tires are better, and yes, the pavement is better. But I mean, we're talking about cars that are approaching uh, current top level competition professional cars 30 years later.
Hmm.
Um, and and these cars are capable of developing thousands of pounds of downforce. I mean, they can drive on the ceiling of a room if they're going fast
Wow.
enough. And they sound good and they run good and they look cool. And just the idea, you know, I think we've all watched cars racing that took our breath away.
Hmm.
When I watch some F1 races, I revel in how quickly the cars change direction at insane speeds.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's why I pick the Chevrolet Intrepid at Watkins Glen, because I saw that in real life from the fence for years and went, this is the daddy. This is what I really.
That's why I wanted to ask the question. I mean, that's why Bill wanted you to answer the question.
It's visceral, you know. I mean, that's what's so fun about all of this. I mean, we want our emotions to be excited by these things, and we want our passions to be awakened by these things. And I mean, to me, it's just one and the same. It's how you can truly feel alive. And
You said it right. I was just thinking the same thing. It's in a rush. It just you do feel alive. You do feel focused and
oh
just
my God, 100%. So I'll just finish real quickly with the fact that, you know, all of these CEOs, these Fortune 50, Fortune 500 CEOs that I've worked with, I mean, they want nothing more than an escape.
mm-hmm.
They have determined that the best escape in the world for them is in a racing cockpit on the racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that is so telling that, you know, people find their nirvana on the track.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Smart people, really smart people who are responsible for the lives of thousands of people and hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars in sales. And yet they choose this environment to not escape, but to refocus, to push everything out of their mind and focus on the task at hand, which is getting that car around that track as quickly as they possibly can.
And that's all your brain can handle.
That's right.
You are literally separated from everything else when you're on race weekend.
Yep.
Nothing else. You don't think about work. You don't think about your work week. You don't think about anything.
And
Better
I
not.
think that's true for
It
I
it
think that's
takes
true for
all of it.
DE. Yeah.
It
I think
takes all of it.
DE is the same way. I think people can be that way in DE if they're
Mhm.
focused properly. Yep.
They should be if they're not.
That's right.
Mhm.
They should be, yes. They shouldn't be asking about point buys. Yes.
No,
Yeah.
no.
No.
That's a different story. Well, sir, it has been way too long for you to have been on, and we look forward to bothering you again. I mean, asking you on again, and we may even get to the questions that we tell you we're going to talk about. So we'll get there.
Well,
No,
it's
no,
always a
I
pleasure.
love
I mean,
every bit of this.
you guys can, I mean, one of the great things is, people, you asked me in the beginning, you said, what's your status now? And I am offering private coaching, primarily at Virginia International Raceway. I'm not doing much traveling, for DE and club racing and professional racing events. But to me, the definition of success is I'm able now to work with who I want to when I want to.
Hmm.
And so for that reason, I have a lot of time to do this, which is my passion of sharing what I've learned over many years with you and your listeners, and engage in this wonderfully productive conversation. I mean, I really feel invigorated by the questions and the conversation that we three have had here this
Hmm.
evening, because I think it's important. I think everything we've talked about here is important.
Yeah. Well, uh, thank you again for coming on. And we have yet to get to VIR, and we would love to work out schedules and get to VIR as soon as we can, and perhaps even work with one Peter Krause.
And
Yeah.
that is on my schedule.
Now we just got to get to VIR, Miss Vicky.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it. Always.
You.
Thank you.
I looked at your Facebook and started pilfering pictures. I'm like, okay. At first, I couldn't tell if it was a first gen MR2 or an X19, and then I figured it out.
It's funny. There's some more similarities than differences on
Yeah,
those things. There are. But the X19 predated the MR2 by quite some time.
quite a bit. I'm a fan of the second gen MR2, so that's fine.
That's a great car. That really is. I had a really good friend locally who had a first gen MR2 and he loved it.
Hmm. Yeah, my friend had a first gen, and I got the second gen, and I liked the way the first gen drove,
Mhm.
but the second gen drove just as good, but was so much prettier.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
Every now and then it matters. I
It
think she's
does. And the coaching business took off again. And the nice thing was that I realized at that time I could invite people and work with who I wanted when I wanted, which is the definition of freedom.
hmm
That was really the good thing. And I've actually been quite busy over the summer and the fall, and it's been good. It's been fun.
Why?
Yeah.
We started this podcast because we started knowing nothing. Actually, probably less than nothing, because what we thought we knew was actually wrong. So that's probably negative knowledge. We started the podcast to help people get started or to help people get better. And if we want somebody who can do either one of those, you would be an ideal guest. So anytime you want to come on.
Well, I mean, it was fun because we reconnected a little bit at New Jersey,
Hmm.
and Garmin sent Ross and I to do Garmin demos,
Hmm.
Catalyst demos, and it was really fun because I just enjoyed sitting under your, you know, fold out cover,
Hmm.
listen to you and Ross talk, because I think we're all committed to the same thing, and
Hmm.
we all want to see forward progress, but how do you affect that progress? And
Yeah.
there is so much information. How do you discriminate you alluded to it just now. You said something that means a lot to me, which is, I thought I knew everything I needed to know, and a lot of it turned out to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't focus on what is wrong. I focus what can be better.
Hmm.
And the difficulty is that there is a tremendous amount of information swirling around, and people need to be able to know enough to discriminate what works and what doesn't, what's right and what's not, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the farther we've gotten into the podcast, like, you know, 600 episodes, we had to learn something, right? Um, we
Yes.
realized, well, at least I did, and I'm pretty sure Vicky did as well. I don't like speaking for others, but who knows? Sometimes what you need to hear depends on where you are on the journey,
Mm.
because what a professional driver needs to hear to get better from his point or her point is different than a decent sports car driver or amateur is very different from a second or third time on track lap day HPDE guy. And sometimes misconstruing where you are on the path and what input you need or what change you can do to improve, you can actually end up making yourself worse if you apply it in the wrong time.
That is an awesome observation because
Yeah.
it's so true. It really is.
So that's the hardest part I've ever had when I was doing the instructing is always, it's not, can I help you get better? It's like, what do I do now?
All the things, all the things.
Oh my God. The last student I had the weirdest problem I've ever had in that he applied the brake pedal with his heel. And I was just like, oh, we got to change it.
Gobsmacked.
We got to change that. How do I change that? Like, how do I change that live on a track? This is not where I need to change this. I need to go drive around town with him. And like, he had no touch. It was just, hammer, nail, boom. And I'm just like, oh. So,
Well,
and
I don't mean to laugh, but I think it's also a function of how hard this really is.
mhm,
I think that thought it wasn't that hard from an abstract perspective, but now having done it for almost 4 decades now, it's really hard. It's
yeah,
harder than it looks, and you know that.
yeah,
You both know that. And the thing that's really fun to me is, okay, I mean, I think where I am so effective as a coach is distilling all the things that could be done at this moment into the most important thing right now.
yeah, that's the hard.
And it doesn't really matter whether it is a newly minted solo driver in a DE, Blue Group and Porsche Club, or,
Hmm.
HPDE2 and NASA. But it's working with a two-time Sebring 12-hour winner, who I mentored in Lamborghini Super Treveo, saying, I want you to change the attitude that you approach this corner this many degrees. And then coming back and saying, you know what, that worked. It made me feel better so that I could stay on the throttle longer and get back on full throttle sooner.
Yeah,
And so that that sort of distillation of the whole thing is, I think, a critical skill that every driver needs
yep.
is, what do I need to go now? One final thing before I give it back to you is, I went to see Ross Braun
Hmm.
speak at one time, and everybody in there was a engineering candidate, interested in getting the knowledge from this remarkable engineer. And he said, my presentation is very simple. My debrief of every driver is one question, and that is, what is the one thing that is getting in the way of you going quicker?
Hmm.
And that was it. And everybody sort of looked around at each other going, oh my God, it's that simple? Well, no, it's not that simple, but that is the essence. And that's what we all need as drivers to push ourselves forward.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's my biggest challenge as an instructor is trying to figure out which one is top right then. And it's actually easier for me to instruct better drivers and figure it out than it is for me to start with, relatively newbies. Because it's just like, well, the Chinese menu says like, I need an L7, I need an L4, little side of, just so much to choose from, so little time.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. And I mean, I agree. I've been spoiled because I think that when I started doing this 18 years ago, working full time, one-on-one with drivers, I thought most of the people that I was going to work with were newbies, were people who had never been on track or green group students.
Right.
And I was surprised because right away it was biased completely the other way. It
Right.
was red and black solo instructors coming to me saying, I've heard so many different things. I want to hear one thing.
Right.
And I say, look, the one thing that I tell you may not be the one thing, but it will at least plant in your mind an idea to allow you to be consistent in your execution. And that is the first step. You
Right.
know, that's the first step.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've noticed, and we may never start this podcast where we're going, but that's fine. The thing I've noticed is the number of people who can instruct um, relatively higher performance drivers and are trustworthy is quite low. Like it gets really thin really fast. And a lot of my friends who are, equal to, slightly worse, or much better, they're starving for somebody to help them. And, sometimes due to life circumstances, they can't get someone like you or someone like us or somebody, to work with them. So, when we go and do instructing events, HPD events, we kind of argue with each other as to who gets to go in whose car because, we're all starving for just that. I need something, and there's always
That
something.
gem, that
Yeah.
gem. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And it's funny that you should say that because I think that was one of the realizations that Ross and I, when we first started talking, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago, um, uh, he was he was saying, I don't really have a lot of experience in this venue. I've always worked with professional drivers and I'm really focused on that, but it appears as though there are a lot of people that could benefit from what I have to say and what you might have to say. He didn't know me very well at that time. But the more that we talked, the more it became apparent that we had shared experience in the fact that the people that were capable of hiring us and bringing us in were doing the same things and telling us the same thing and saying,
Mhm.
we are sort of shocked. It's bereft of good information. It's not that people are screwed up or screwing up. It's just that we are there is a paucity of good information consistently and understandably and practically able to be applied out there.
Yeah.
And the organizations do the best they can. That's why there's such a huge difference between particular regions of the Porsche Club of America. And I'll tell
NASA,
you right,
NASA too.
and NASA too, and BMW Club, and I mean, I think of all the really good DE programs, and yet it's not universal, and it may never be. We have to come to grips with the fact that we can't just wave a magic wand and make everybody come up to snuff. We can't do it. It's not possible.
And
Um,
certain groups and certain HPDs just resonate differently with people, and what works for one person, and they go into another one. It's like, oh, now I'm having my moment. It could be just the instructor, it could be the program. It's really kind of weird how that kind of works itself out.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I think you've hit the nail on the head is because really it boils down to culture.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And the culture of the organization can either be collaborative or it can be confrontational.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is that some people believe that the best learning is through confrontation, is to be raw, unalloyed, no BS delivery of the information. Well, some people don't respond well to that,
Mm-mm.
I mean, they don't. And part of it is because these organizations aren't listening. I'm sorry, I'm starting to beat the table.
It's
They're not
okay.
listening to their students.
I'm a,
Whereas,
I'm about to jump on the soapbox too, so don't feel bad.
well, this is good. I mean, I think we're all on the same page here because the regions and the chapters that seem to do well are those that actively solicit the input of their students first and front and center. That's all.
Mhm.
So one of the things that's
Yeah.
interesting is I got a piece of paper from
Mhm.
my latest race called driver conduct.
Right.
And the third paragraph starts with a letter in bold that says overtaking, semicolon. Fast guys, capitalized, have capitalized no extra rights.
Correct. It's
And
just
I
like
looked at
skiing.
this and I was like, wow, what a novel concept.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, this is what people need to hear
Yeah.
is, quit ragging on the slow people. They're doing the best they can. Put the onus on the quick people to
Yep.
act responsibly.
Yep.
And
Well, you know
and
what?
if they can't, excuse them from the event for a
Mm-mm.
time or two.
And you
Yeah.
know what? Those slow people are not,
They didn't
they're
come there to do
they're
that.
learning a different way. They are
Exactly.
learning skills before speed.
Absolutely.
You
I
know,
agree
and speed will
100%.
come when you are comfortable with your skills.
That's right.
You were one of the first people during our podcast. I remember, I think you were the person that did the track layout for hold on, for
Yep.
Atlanta, Road Atlanta.
Wrote it. Oh no, that was the track walk. We watched him and Ross talk about it. That was not the
Ah,
Right,
podcast.
yes.
Yeah,
right. That was so early on in my driving.
that was her fourth race.
So when you came on and you started talking, I'm like, that's him. I it has been that long
That's
because when
amazing.
I watched that when I was going to Road Atlanta, we were so early in our racing,
That's
so
like 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
yeah, that I
Yeah,
was just like, as soon as that was my first aha moment
that's
when I
fun.
was with your thing. And
That
we've
is
been doing it that long.
It became quite the joke that Miss Vicky was very upset when she didn't see the lines that she saw in the track walk
I
video.
never said that.
They
Don't
weren't.
you no,
I
don't
didn't say that was true. I said it was a great
uh,
joke though.
joke.
She was so
That's
upset
funny.
that Road Atlanta didn't have those lines.
No,
That is so
don't.
funny. They paid
No.
right over them. They
That's
did.
right. I
Yep.
can't believe they did that.
Actually, Ross and I are in the middle of a version 2 of all of the track walks we've done, plus another 20 tracks.
Nice.
Mhm.
And what we're doing is we are making 45-minute presentations with a 40, 50, or 60 page PDF.
Oh, that'd be great.
Mhm.
And that way we don't just sit there and go on and on and on about stuff.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna say the only thing that was difficult with the track walks you guys had was they're great to do, but they're hard to do like on the track or on the way to the
right,
track.
like I need to get to
Yeah.
turn 7. I don't want
Yeah.
to go through all of it. I need
Like
to get to
yeah,
what I want.
like
Yeah.
is there a turn in point or some type of visual mark for turn 14 at pit race? Still don't have an answer.
No.
It's my favorite track, and I still just do it by feel because I'm like, there's nothing. There's just trees. I can't
I'll
see a
tell
damn
you,
thing.
Jim and his wife have done a phenomenal job with that place. They really have.
I love that
Which
track.
track?
Pit
It's a
race.
great track. Pit race.
Oh yeah.
Really good.
Yeah. That's become one of our favorites.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I ran that track for the first time in 2004 when only
The little pits was open.
the little track was up, and
Mhm.
we were doing 58-second laps on that.
Wow. We've never
Yeah.
done that. We've only done the full.
We were going
Mhm.
really, really, really fast, and I really enjoyed that track. And I have not been on the big track yet, but I'm going.
Oh, when you
So,
going?
well, I was supposed to go to typically where I'm going to go is PVGP,
Mm-hmm.
so the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix week
Yep.
before.
Yep.
But now what I think I'm going to do is find a DE that I can run there.
Okay.
And then I will race there next year. So,
No, okay. We're going there twice this year. We're going to a Lucky Dog race,
good.
and because we want Lucky Dog to come to the Northeast, and
Mhm.
we're going
Where are
to
they
the
based
Grid
out of?
Life, West Coast, the San Francisco area.
Mhm.
Oh,
But
wow.
they're fantastic. It's like the perfect blend of fun and racing.
See, that's the balance that most folks don't get right, or if they get it right, it gets torqued one way
Yeah.
or the
Well,
other.
Kathy was involved with Lemons early, and then she went to Champ Car West Coast, and then
Sure.
she started Lucky Dog, and she's fantastic.
Everybody I've heard talk about Lucky Dogs says nothing but good things, and I tell you, the first Grid Life event I went to was that Jersey event in 2022,
Hmm.
and I have been incredibly impressed.